bunch of repeating patterns like this. Each one of these little blocks is 1 bit of storage. And so this is the Z80's internal registers. If you count down, there's 16 blocks, so it's a 16-bit register pair. So each column is a separate register. Over here, we know the address lines are connected, so we can figure that this must be the program counter and the incrementing circuit for the program counter. And then the data bus is connected over here to read out the registers. If you go into a little more detail, there's some interesting things I found. There's secret registers, WZ. These are used internally, even though they're invisible to the programmer, for internal storage. Another thing is the Z80 has a couple instructions that will swap the data in registers. And it turns out that it's actually not moving the data between registers. Instead, it swaps the control lines at the top. So it's much faster than actually moving data between registers. So just one of these optimizations that you find inside a chip. The next thing that you see in a lot of microprocessors from this era is called the PLA for instruction decoding. That's this block up here. The way this works is the data bus, we figured out, comes in here. The instruction register holds the instruction.
I don't like the fact that I make myself beholden to the long pieces.
Across here, each transistor will match a bit in the instruction. So what you end up with is, something like, say, 001 indicates a load. That will generate a control line coming out. Other things will match all the different instructions. So this is where the matching between the instruction set and what actually happens in the chip happens. And so instruction sets get designed so that it's easy to get from a bit pattern into what's happening. The third interesting block is the ALU. This is where things actually happen in the chip, the addition, subtraction, bit operations. Most chips use a bit slice, so they'll have, for an 8-bit processor, 8 stacks of circuitry, one handling each bit of the data. Now, the bizarre thing I found in the Z80 is that you can see there's only 4 slices here. The Z80 is an 8-bit chip, but it only has 4 bits of ALU. How does that work? Well, it turns out that the performance of the Z80, the designers realized it was limited by memory speed, so they had enough time they could run everything through the ALU twice. So they saved space by putting a 4-bit ALU into an 8-bit chip. So from this level, we can figure out a lot about the chip, but to learn more, we have to dive down into the transistor level. So I'll give you the quick description of MOS transistors. For our purposes, we can consider it basically a switch. When the gate is on, it will connect the source and drain. When the gate is off, they're disconnected. On the silicon, we have a silicon layer, which is basically insulator. Parts of it get diffused with impurities such as boron to become conducting semiconductor. There's a polysilicon gate on top, separated by a small insulating layer.
He sounds nervous.
Due to semiconductor magic, it makes this part conduct, and when the gate is off, this is not conducting, and they're disconnected. A couple interesting things. This thin oxide layer is why MOS transistors are static sensitive. If you shuffle your feet across the carpet and touch the chip, the charge in the gate has nowhere to go, and it'll just blow a hole right through the oxide layer and destroy the chip. In the early days, the gate was made out of metal, so you'd have metal, oxide, and semiconductor, so that was your MOS transistor. Ever since about 1970, they've used polysilicon, so it's really a POS transistor, but they don't use that word. So this is once you have the transistors, you can connect them up to form some gates. Take 2 transistors, you have a NAND gate. If both your inputs are 1,
it's a joke, I don't know anything about it.
It pulls the output to ground and you get a 0. Pretty straightforward. And if you have a 0 input, the transistor stops conducting, and this resistor will pull the output high.
It's good enough.
And so it's very easy to implement that with MOS transistors.
It's also good enough for me.
When you look at a chip, it's a lot more complicated than that. We can zoom way in on the Z80 chip, and we get something like this. At first, it looks, just bizarre, but if you stare at it long enough, it'll start to make sense. Here's what's on the chip photo, and here's what it actually means.
I mean, literally,
I don't
believe anything like that would make sense.
Doped silicon.
Simply by staring at it.
These things that look like metal on top, that's the metal layer of the chip that connects stuff up, provides 5 volts and ground to the gate. The inputs are polysilicon coming down. Wherever polysilicon crosses silicon, it turns into a transistor. So you see that you have your 2 transistors for the NAND gate here. And then the pull-up resistor is actually implemented with a transistor because resistors are just awful on ICs.
Sure.
So if you stare at these chip photos long enough and closely enough, you can figure out all the transistors, figure out the circuitry. It's a little tedious. It's easier if someone like the Visual 6502 team goes in and has people who digitize all these things into polygons, and then it's much easier to extract the transistors and the circuitry.
Holy fuck, I did it again!
So it's not all NAND gates, though.
I mean,
it's just as easy to build
I PB'd like 10 minutes ago or something.
Now, if any transistor is turned
Apparently
on,
I've learned
grounded,
things.
if all inputs are 0,
And maybe I should listen to more of these.
So that seems straightforward enough.
What is it? Integrated circuit videos?
They want
Sure.
to optimize things, so they've made a whole bunch of crazy gates.
I guess I'll link it in the description. Excellent.
It's a little hard to follow.